Hey, what's up, fellas? How you doing, man? Antonelli here.
Hey, what's going on, guys? How we doing? Matt Antonelli here. Today we're answering your questions, and today's question just came over to me on a YouTube comment, and the question is, was I always the best player on my team as I grew up as a younger player? And so we're going to go team by team, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on this and answer the question. The first thing I want to say, though, before I get into my career, is that I think this is a misconception. And I get this a lot. I think this thought is a prevailing one with most people, is that they assume that anyone that gets drafted, anyone that plays professional, and especially anyone that plays in the major leagues, was always an amazing player, was always the best player by far. And in my experience playing with a lot of great players, that always isn't the case. Now, it is sometimes. There's some players that have been, the best players their whole lives by a long shot. But I've played with plenty of players in the major leagues that were not the best players on their teams. I've played with players that have gotten cut from high school teams. I've played with players in the major leagues that didn't make varsity in their high school until their senior year. And so I've had players that were really bad in Little League. I think everyone develops at different times. Not everybody develops super early and is just a stud player and the best player from the time they pick up a baseball bat. And oftentimes, I think a lot of times with younger players, the kids that are the best, sometimes when you're really young, the kids that are the best in Little League, a lot of times those aren't the same players that are the best a few years later into high school ball and then into college ball, for a variety of reasons. Sometimes, the best players when you're really young are the big kids. They're the kids that mature physically sooner than the other players. And so, when you're a young player, if you're just a big, strong kid at 10 years old or 12 years old, well, you have a huge advantage over somebody that maybe has a lot of skill, but maybe he's only, 4 foot tall and 92 pounds, or 72 pounds in Little League. And so, and that's really the same way all the way up. So don't get concerned if, or discouraged, I should say, if you are a younger player and maybe you're not the best player at that point in time. That doesn't mean that you can't play at a higher level. That doesn't mean that you won't be a good player if you continue to work hard. And a lot of times, again, you'll see a lot of times those undersized players, those players that maybe don't develop physically as soon as some of the other players, they have to work harder. They have to make sure that their swing and their body works really well. Or when they're pitching, they have to make sure that their body works really well because they can't rely on just being big and strong. And so you have to have a really good work ethic. And eventually when you do start to grow and you do get a little bit bigger and stronger, well, now you have the skill to go along with the physical maturity that happens whenever it does. You put those together, you become a really good player. And those players oftentimes will pass over those bigger players that not always, but sometimes those bigger players that maybe have it a little bit easier when they're younger, they don't need as good of a swing. They don't need as good of an arm action. They just can rely on their physical traits. So maybe they don't work as hard. Maybe they get complacent. And then when other players start to catch up to them physically, well, they haven't developed a good work ethic. They haven't developed good mechanics, and then they get passed over. So just keep that in mind. And I've seen that happen with a lot of players. Okay, so now I want to give you I want to go back into my career as a younger player, talk about some things, and talk about what I think has helped me develop and continue to move from level to level, from T-ball all the way eventually to the major leagues. So I think if we go back to Little League, let's start at Little League for a second. I was always one of the better players in Little League. I grew up in a town, about 50,000 people, called Peabody, Massachusetts. In Little League, we had basically 3 leagues. We had Peabody West, Peabody American, and Peabody National. And, I would say for, from 12 years old and younger in Little League, I was one of the best players in my league, PBD West. I wouldn't say I was the best player. I would say I was one of the top players in that. We actually had a couple other players. We had a player, Jeff Allison, who was the best player. He ended up getting drafted. We were the same grade. He got drafted, or in the same age also. He got drafted in the first round out of high school, out of PBD high school. He was the best player. He was the most talented young player I've ever played with and seen. When he played as a 12-year-old, I think most people that watched him play said, man, this guy's going to play in the major leagues one day. This guy's going to get drafted. That's how good he was. He was a combination of physically talented, but also very, very skilled. And so he was probably the best player. He was better than me. And we had some other good players. We had a player, Mark Shorey, that was better than me at that point. Ended up getting drafted. And so, again, I was one of the better players, but not the best player. Now, one thing I always did, this is something that my dad, I guess, basically did, is that he always wanted to challenge me to play against better players, play with the best, play against the best. And so I made sure, through Little League, I was one of the better players. I'd say, I don't know, again, top 5 player, top 10 player maybe in our city. I went on and played, I moved up to a travel ball team called Lightning Baseball, which then took the best players. Nowadays there's tons of travel ball teams. Back then there weren't a whole lot. And so that team was really the best players from really our area, all the surrounding towns. We had players from New Hampshire that came down. And so I was always looking, I never wanted to be the best player. My dad didn't ever want me to be the best player. He wanted always to challenge me to play against better players. And so I moved to a travel ball team so that hopefully I wasn't the best player. And when I got on that team, I wasn't. I actually was a shortstop from 12U and under. And when I got to that team, I moved to second base because I wasn't good enough to play shortstop. So I had to move from my position to another position because there was somebody else better than me that could play that position. And I think that's a good thing because for me as a player, that makes me have to work if I want my position back. And it took me another 2 years to finally get it back. When I was 14, I had another player beat me out for that. I had to move to third base. And then finally when I was 15, I finally got back to shortstop, back to my main position. And then I stayed there until I got to college. So for me as a player and as a parent, you have to make a decision. And I know sometimes it might not be easy to find another team or find some place else that can challenge you. But do you want to be the best player on the team to where you've got the spot, you're going to start every game, you're going to play your position, or do you want to challenge yourself to go someplace and play on a team where you're not the best player and where you have to make sure you're working really hard or else you're not going to play. And maybe you have to move to a new position. So that was the way that as a player I kind of always did things as a younger player. And again, my dad kind of had that philosophy that we were always looking to try to play on the best team possible to push me. And that continued. I went to high school. So I went to a private high school, an all-boys private high school that was known for really, really good baseball. When I got there, we had, as an 8th grader, so I got there in 9th grade, but when I was in 8th grade, that high school, St. John's Prep, had won the state championship. So it was the best high school team in the state. And then my freshman year, I ended up starting a season on JV, got called up to varsity, and we ended up winning the state championship again. So we were back-to-back state champs. I ended up playing. When I got called up, I actually played in the outfield, and I never played in the outfield before. So again, had to play a different position, had to learn a new position. My sophomore year, I started the first game in the outfield, and I kept working to try to get back to shortstop, and eventually that year I did get moved to shortstop, and then I played shortstop for all 3 years in high school. When it came to summer ball, I started to develop. I started to get more physical. When I was a little younger, I was a little smaller. When I was 13, 14, I wasn't a big kid. I look at my picture, my 13-year-old travel ball team, Lightning Baseball, and I'm like one of the littlest kids there. And so I started to develop physically as I got a little bit older. And I became, again, I was probably one of the better players, one of the best players on that team by the time I was 15-ish, 16-ish years old. The best player was Jeff Allison, who I told you about before. He was also on that team. And then when I became a junior in high school, I got a call from Ron Slusher of the Ohio Warhawks, and he had a travel ball team that was considered one of the best teams in the country, and they had heard about me at I think a Perfect Game showcase or something, and they asked for me to go out there and play. And so I had another decision: do I want to stay with my friends and stay local, or do I want to go to Ohio for summer and play there? And so I'd always had the philosophy, like I said, to look to play for the best team possible, to push myself, and so I went and played there. So I went from one of the best players, and then I tried to make myself again one of not the best players. And so when I went out there, a lot of good players. I think we ended up I played there for 2 summers, and I think we ended up having like 5 first-round picks during my 2 years there. So we had a really, really good team. We lost in the finals of the WWBA National Championship down in Georgia, which was a great tournament, and so we were really, really good. So again, at this point, I'm starting to be known, I guess, as one of the better players, one of the better high school players in the country. Not like a top 5 or 10 player, but I don't know. I think I was ranked in the top, I don't even know. I don't know nationally. I remember in the Northeast, I was ranked as one of the top players. Then got recruited to go play at Wake Forest. Ended up playing at Wake Forest. When I came in, again, I had to move. I wanted to play shortstop. Got recruited as a shortstop. Ended up moving to third base, and never went back to shortstop. I did a pretty good job at third. They kept me over at third base. I came in, started right away. Wasn't the best player on the team, but had a pretty good freshman year. And then by the time I left college, again, I was probably one of the better players in the team. I ended up getting drafted in the first round, so I became one of the better players in the country. And then went into pro ball. Oh, in college, the other thing is I played in the Cape Cod League. So that was for, some of the better players in the country would go and play summer ball there. And again, that continued up in the pro ball. I played pro ball, got into the big leagues, didn't have the big league career I thought I was going to have for a variety of reasons. If you've never seen our channel, I have a lot of videos that delve into that, so I don't want to spend time in this video talking about it, but you guys can go watch those other videos. But I think kind of the moral of the story is I was always one of the better players, maybe never the best player, but it was kind of by design, which I think is a good way to develop. So I never wanted to be the best player. I mean, I wanted to try to be the best player, but at the same time, I wanted to make sure I was playing on teams where I wasn't the best player, so that I would continue to have the goal of being able to strive and be pushed by other players, by play against the best, play with the best, and I think that really helped me continue to get better throughout my career, from when I was real little until I stopped playing baseball. So hopefully that gives you guys a little bit of insight into what my career was like as a player, and hopefully that helps you out as you're developing and as you're playing and kind of moving up through the ranks, whether you're a parent or a player, or maybe you're a parent of a player. So thank you again for the question. I hope this helps you out. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell if you haven't done so already. Thank you to our patrons on Patreon who have helped support the channel. There's been a lot of you, especially lately. We really, really appreciate your support. And that's all we got. We'll talk to you later.